So that means we would have started riding when you were in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
And I was probably 30.
Yeah.
God, that has been a long time. Well, that's one of the great things about bikes. As long as people keep riding, you continue the relationship. I do remember the first time I went to Ipswich.
If you get complacent there, you can end up on the side of the trail with broken ribs.
Yes. I would almost rather have a broken rib than poison ivy.
Yeah.
This is not swamp you ever want to fall in either.
Hi, this is Wesley Cheney, and welcome to my podcast called Tell Me About Your Bike. In this episode, we're going to be listening to a conversation I had with an old riding buddy of mine by the name of Liz Schleeper. Liz and I have been riding together in Norfolk, Virginia for almost 20 years now. So we have a lot of time that we've spent in the saddle together, a lot of pace lines where we've been pulling each other along the road. And a lot of times we've been out riding at Ipswich, mountain biking in the swamps of Tidewater, Virginia. That may sound like a misnomer. There are no mountains around here, but in fact there are some pretty challenging technical trails with a lot of texture in the terrain. So listen now to my interview with Liz and sit back, grab a beer like we did, and enjoy yourself.
We are at Liz Schleeper's house in her bike room. I'm looking up at a dozen bikes.
Hello.
So we're just going to do some quick introductions. My name's Wesley, and I'm the host of Tell Me About Your Bike. It's a podcast where I ask people about their bikes, tell them stories about their bikes, talk about stories that their bikes have made happen. And yep, and there's the dog in the background, and that's just going to be part of it.
She's looking for.
Come on, Pam, let's go pee.
So you see,
Yeah, Tidewater Grand Slam 93.
That was the last year that went on.
Oh man, that's so cool.
And Pam Zimmerman brought me that poster when we were doing the, the downtown race.
Right.
We modeled it off of what T-Win did.
Yep.
And so when she brought that, I'm like, I gotta get that in a frame or it's never gonna happen.
Oh, that is so cool.
So there are people in there.
Yeah.
I don't even remember who's told me they're in there, but they're actually in that picture.
And your name is?
It's Liz Schleeper.
And all you got, 10 bikes in here? Hanging up, about half of them hanging off the roof, the ceiling?
Well, there are 8 bikes hanging
5,
up.
6, 7, 8 hanging up.
And then my sister's bike, Cruiser, sitting down here on the floor, along with a donated little bike.
And now you got more storage areas with pedals and saddles and a yoga mat that looks very clean.
Yeah, the yoga mat doesn't get used as much as the bikes.
And an old kayak paddle, and it looks like some Yakima rack trays for putting your bike on the roof, and a pair of wheels that might go with a beautiful red and silver, did you say it's Sirota?
It's a Sirota.
Sirota, steel, aluminum.
I think that's aluminum.
I think you're right. I think it's aluminum. Aluminum Sirota frame. Beautiful.
The interesting thing about this room is it's split into my stuff and then some donated stuff.
Right.
So I'm very clear. Most everything on that shelf that you pointed out is our donations. That way I can keep them separate and I always know where to find stuff.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's in good boxes. You know exactly where it is. It's not getting mixed up. Yeah,
and then there's like this bike that's just a brand new Roadmaster, just ready to go for the right person. It's small.
Right.
It's 24-inch wheels, so it's going to be for somebody that probably a female.
Yeah, and it's
who's
like
in need.
it's a decent Walmart 18-speed mountain bike. It's nothing special, but it'll get somebody to work.
Yes.
Get somebody to school.
Yes.
So Liz, do you remember the first ride we were on together? When would that have been?
The first ride you and I were on together? Yeah. It would have been, early 2000s?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe the late 90s?
Maybe. But I can't pinpoint a ride that we would specifically been on together. I'm sure it would have been in Norfolk.
I think it might have been from East Coast Bikes.
It would have probably been from East Coast Bikes.
And I can remember going down Powhatan and doing the loop out Terminal Boulevard and then the airport.
Like the Monday night ride?
Yeah, the Monday night ride.
Okay. So perhaps that's true, and we would have been on probably mountain bikes.
I think we might. I don't know. I can remember your blue Cannondale mountain bike.
Okay. That would have been around the same time. Okay, so the blue Cannondale mountain bike, we used to do rides at night, and everybody had to bring mountain bikes.
Right.
That was the rule, because we didn't want people out on skinny tires because of
in the dark.
In the dark.
Yeah.
Skinny tires, dark. People get going too fast. You hit one hole, and everybody's going to go down in the hole, and so.
Right.
The rule then was you ride a mountain bike. So now that we have different types of bikes, like cross bikes and gravel bikes, nobody wants to be on the mountain bike at night. They want to be on a cross bike.
Yeah, because the tires are skinnier, so you go a little faster.
Yeah.
For the same amount of energy.
Right. But back then, we were all on mountain bikes.
Yeah, and there was probably like one or two people who would show up with a cross bike, and we were kind of like, okay.
Who are these people?
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of cross bikes in 2002.
Right.
But I think one of the earliest Monday night rides I remember doing was, or maybe it was a Saturday morning ride. Mm-hmm. We were going out from East Coast Bikes, and it was in July, just after Lance had won the Tour.
Okay, so that would have been, 99?
Yeah.
Didn't he win the first one in 99?
Yeah, I mean, this was probably like, I don't think, it wasn't the first time he'd won the Tour. He had won a tour. I'm not sure which tour it was, but going out there and having the folks show up who were inspired by Lance to get out their road bike.
Yes. Well, we definitely saw the effects of Lance here in Hampton Roads, because the bike industry, I think, has had a good upturn during that time. Sure.
Yeah, they definitely did. There was a lot of people who were getting out on bikes and riding, and sometimes they knew what they were doing, and sometimes they didn't.
Sure.
Yeah, I have fond memories of that.
Well, what's kind of neat is when you think about the night rides, the lights cost us more back then.
Yeah.
And they weren't as good.
No, they weren't. We'd be spending $200, $300, $400 for a set of lights.
Yes.
Like those Saigo lights, I think those were like $500.
Yes. Easily $300 for a good set of lights, and then they weren't as good as the ones that are $89 now.
Right, and they would have these massive battery packs. I remember having a lead acid battery that was the size of a large water bottle.
Yes.
And it was like 4 pounds.
Yep, a heavy battery.
Yeah, and now the LED lights are everywhere, and they just make life so much easier.
Exactly.
These little cheap, extremely bright lights, that's changed so much.
Yes.
And made it so much easier to go out and ride and just be able to enjoy riding. Oh my gosh. So, what was it like the first time you rode at Ipswich? So, let me preface this before I get you to answer that question, I'm just going to do a little bit of, what is Ipswich? No one knows what that is. It's not a witch. Ipswich is the name that locals use for a park in Chesapeake, Virginia, where the mountain biking is allowed. And it's one of the last little remnants of green space that's stuck in this suburban filled-in swamp. On
That's
the edge
a great
of
way to describe.
You're stuck between the Dismal Swamp and the Chesapeake Bay. And this land has been diked and drained, and there's this tiny little park that's stuck, like on one side there's a Volkswagen dealership. I think on the other there's like a 1970s development. On the other side there's like some really low cost housing. And then I think there's a Krispy Kreme as well, because you always smell donuts.
I don't think there's a Krispy Kreme over there.
Maybe it's not a Krispy Kreme. There's some type of bakery. Because I can smell...
You're thinking of, well... You might be thinking when we're coming back to Norfolk, the bakery that we could smell.
There's another one.
Is there? Okay, I didn't know.
I think there's a bakery like across Military Highway.
Okay.
From it.
Maybe so.
And so if the wind is blowing the right way,
okay, well,
I'll be like, I'll smell it.
I haven't experienced that.
Yeah, and so it's a tiny little park. This swampy little park, but it still has some old growth trees in it. And for 30, 40 years, the kids have been in there.
Yeah.
hacking trails out. I think maybe at one point it was a Girl Scout camp. I think I've heard that.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting space, and it's an awesome space. And like you say, the kids have been, nobody can say that the kids that work back there and make the BMX trails are on their phones, because they've been working back there. And they maintain the trails very nicely. And then, there's sort of the BMX part, and then there's the mountain bike part.
Yeah.
And I do remember the first time I went to Ipswich. It's back when the old Colley Avenue bike shop was there on Colley Avenue. And there were a couple guys in there who rode mountain bikes, and I had just gotten, I just bought a specialized mountain bike from Mike Ship. And this is before he owned East Coast Bikes.
Okay, he's still working at Colley.
Mike Ship worked at Colley Avenue Bike Shop as a mechanic. And he was an interesting guy, because he worked as a mechanic, and then he had this little, collection of, let me say the right thing, is Star Wars, right? He's
Star Wars, not Star Trek, Star Wars.
Yeah, he had I guess the owner had allowed him to put his collection of Star Wars stuff in this cabinet. And I said, oh, so, you're a Star Wars guy. But anyway, he had this collection of Star Wars, and he was a quiet guy, and but we were the same height, and he sold me his specialized mountain bike. And so I went out riding with a few of the guys that used to work there, and said, there aren't any trails around here. And they said, well, we're going to take you there. And we had to ride 10 miles to get to it.
Right, yeah.
But when we got
to
it,
over 2 bridges.
Yeah, over. Well, back then that bridge that goes near the Ford plant was there. That one that's in the neighborhood. That would have been one more. That one that's in the neighborhood that they've blocked off.
I missed that. I knew I've seen it, but I've never been able to ride it.
Yeah, we rode over that bridge. I think that was probably the most memorable part to me, because I didn't know that bridge was there. There's a bridge there are actually a couple bridges in Norfolk that are shut down, and they shut them down by completely blocking them with fences so that people can't get on them. And
they're usually pedestrian bicycle bridges.
They're pedestrian/bike bridges, but people don't want people on those bridges because it's close to their neighborhoods. So I think there's all kinds of politics involved.
Yeah.
But
and typically these little bridges would would connect neighborhoods that were separated by these little marshy rivers and streams in Norfolk.
Yes.
Because Norfolk is a very swampy city. So they allow you to move from one neighborhood to the other without having to go an additional half mile or a mile and a half and ride on really big, loud streets with cars.
Yes, that is a great way to describe it. And those waterways are tidal. The bridges I can think of, these are tidal waterways that there's some value in having the bridge over it, because it's, you're all of a sudden in the middle of this cool tidal waterway. It's not like it's a retention lake. But anyway, back then that bridge, I remember going over that bridge and thinking, this is the coolest thing ever. That has been since closed. And then we got out to Ipswich, and I just kind of followed the guys, and I had ridden bikes all my life. I hadn't really mountain biked that much in my life, but since I, could ride a bike, I, figured out, Ipswich is pretty easy to navigate, and because it's flat, and it's windy, but as long as you're following somebody who knows the flow there, it's a great time.
Yeah, but when you say flat, it's not flat like a basketball court is flat, because there's all these tiny little places where the trail goes up 3 feet to go over a fallen log, and then it drops down another 5 feet into this gully, and then you have to go back up the other side, and the incline that you can be going down can easily be 20 to 40 degrees.
Sure.
And so even though it's not flat, you're constantly having to shift and be aware of what you're doing, because if you don't, you find yourself coming to a stop on the uphill and having to awkwardly unclip and dismount and push your bike up to the top of this little 3-foot rise that you couldn't get over.
Yes. When I say, flat's the wrong word.
It's at sea level.
There's a lot of texture to it, and you definitely have to be you have to be ready to shift gears. And what's fun is to ride with people who actually call that out in advance. Mm-hmm. In fact, when I've taken riders through who aren't familiar with it, I'll call out, hill coming or shift down when something's coming that you just don't see. You don't see it coming until you're halfway on it.
Right.
And so it's a cool space. And then once you know everything, the flow there is just so much fun because you know where the hills are.
Right. But then that flow is constantly evolving as the space is evolving, because every season a tree falls or another one is removed or a bridge gets washed out or a bridge gets added or a berm gets rebuilt. And so everything is always changing there. And you think... And that's where, if you get complacent there, you can end up on the side of the trail with broken ribs.
Yes. Oh, yes. And then, no doubt, I always think of on the side of the trail in the poison ivy.
Well, that too.
Because I would almost rather have a broken rib than poison ivy.
Yeah.
But Mike Park, I think, ended up with some poison ivy after falling off of a bridge, so...
And then there's the greenbrier, which just hangs everywhere. And if you've never seen greenbrier, it's this vine that just grows up everything in the swamp around here, and it has thorns on it.
Exactly.
and so like the baby thorns are like maybe like the size of your pinky nail, and the fully mature thorns that are like brown and hard as steel are like the size of your big toenail. and so even if you don't crash, you can just be riding down and suddenly there'll be a vine just hanging in the middle of the trail and you get whipped by this thing, and now you're like having to get into the shower and pull thorns out of your shoulders because it's a challenge. And then riding those berms that they've got the old dikes, so they built those to drain the fields. They contained the water, segmented it off, and then started pumping the water out. These berms are still there, so you'll ride up on top of that, and you'll be riding almost at the tops of the trees and kind of looking down into the swamp on either side.
Yeah.
And
and this is not swamp you ever want to fall in either. I mean, swamp around here is everything from tidal waterways to non-tidal, and these are just man-made ditches dug, and the water in there doesn't move.
No, it doesn't.
I think there are a couple of them there's a little bit of movement.
Yeah,
but,
and there's been times when we've gone out there and actually like removed the trees and the pallets and the blue vinyl tarps that were blocking the water movement in order to get it going.
Just to get something going, yes.
And then stood on the side with beers and just looked at it. Well, okay, maybe we didn't have beers, but stood on the side and looked at the water actually moving and just were like shocked, like, wow, I've never seen it move. That's
exactly.
That's crazy.
We got some great pictures of pulling stuff out of that park.
Oh my gosh. Did I tell you that I took Kelvin out there?
Oh, I bet he loved it.
He did. And it was it was the day of the Tidewater Mountain Bike Challenge. Okay. And I had ordered parts for my mountain bike.
Right.
And was trying to get them on the day before in
and
order
it
to
didn't
ride.
Work out. Okay.
And it didn't work out. And so all I was left with was, I had two bikes that were still working.
Okay.
My bamboo road bike or my recumbent. So I took my recumbent out.
You took your recumbent out?
I took my recumbent out to
Ipswich?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got 26 by 1.75 inch tires on it. It was and it does have a front shock and a front disc brake. It was a challenge. We stayed on the bigger trails.
That would like be taking a pedal boat, whatever those things are called, into rapids. I mean, it just seems kind of a fit that...
It worked once. Like, he was really dead set on riding dirt that day.
Okay.
And I knew that he was really excited about that. And I said, okay, let's go do this. And I thought, if I can stay on the broader trails to start with, the ones that are just basically just straight and flat and sandy, let's see how it goes. And if I'm not, totally screwing up.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. If I'm not totally screwing up, and I'm able to maintain control, we'll go on some of the little more technical stuff, which actually worked out well because it gave him an opportunity to ride on some of the easier stuff first, get a feel for it, and then I led him into the other stuff. And I got a few looks though. There was some but yeah, you can do it. I wouldn't. I would rather have taken my mountain bike with me.
The great thing about that park is that it has really come alive in the last several years because, first of all, groups that we've been part of and that other people have been part of have come in and just pulled trash out because somehow people really thought it was a good place to dump things.
Yeah.
And once the trash was out, I guess I had the idea people were going to be bringing more trash in, but it really hasn't happened that way.
That's great to hear. Because that's what I would have thought, that the same thing, is that it just would have been more in. But it's just been small litter, the stuff that... wrappers from blunt cigars and cans of Mountain Dew and Red Bull.
Yes. And so that's been a great thing. And I think it does speak to, if you clean up an area and make it better for everybody, that people will respect it a little bit more. Also, there's a group called Friends of the Indian River Park.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, that Ross has, headed up.
Right, okay.
And they've been really good about getting out there. They've been getting Boy Scouts out there and just a lot of activity and keeping people involved with keeping the place looking good. The value of Ipswich, and, I just don't think there are very many parks like this anywhere. Is what you have called, it's very, did you call it like a democratic trail system? It is definitely by the people.
I think I've used it. I've said it's a democratic trail system.
It's not, the city of Chesapeake did not do anything there. The only thing they do, and they're very frank about what they are able to do there. The only thing they do is they have 2 trash cans on the perimeter that they will empty, on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But as far as going in and being able to maintain anything in that trail system, they just don't have the manpower. They've never had it in the budget to do that.
Yeah.
So it's all dependent on outside groups, and most of the outside groups don't get all they don't feel the need to dominate any other outside group. So a bunch of outside groups kind of do their own thing in there, and it's a cool system because of that.
Yeah, and there's we haven't even touched on the BMX aspect of it, but oh my gosh, this is in the middle of this park. You're just in a suburban cul-de-sac, and there's some trees and like a faded wooden sign and a list of things that you can't do, and then some poison ivy growing up around some old beer bottles maybe. But you walk into the woods 50 feet and suddenly it opens up and you're in the midst of a BMX jump park that is, so it's some of the jumps that they have are taller than I am. And I'm 6.5 feet tall. And some of these ramps will go up 8-10 feet. I mean, they'll have a 90-degree angle at the top of them. I mean, and they're set up so that if you were riding through there, you'd be getting 15-20 feet of air sometimes. I mean, it's just ridiculous amounts. It's amazing and it's been built by kids with shovels.
Yeah,
they're like
shovels.
Like teenage boys are just like going out into the woods and digging in the woods and like pounding this dirt and molding it and so that they can ride things that honestly probably most of them don't have the skills to ride. Like I can't imagine most of the kids can actually jump the majority of the stuff that's there. I think most of them are on the small stuff when I've ever been there. They're taking the small jumps, but it's like...
Agree.
It's like a monster truck where it's like, I don't care how tall it is and how unfunctional it is. I want to have the tallest one on the block.
That's right.
and you kind of feel it's like this young testosterone zone.
Yeah.
And then you get these old gray hairs who are cruising around on mountain bikes and cross bikes on the perimeter and are totally in their own world. And then there's a bunch of stoners who are just like hanging out, smoking blunts and leaving the wrappers behind and building fires in the middle of the park. And we're just like, okay.
I know there were a couple very crafty benches there too, among in the BMX area. So they've also set up like recreational spots and places you can just sit and watch everyone in the BMX area.
Yeah, I've seen some guys go out there with remote control trucks and remote control cars and take them up and over those jumps, which is hilarious because they're like, they're sitting there twitching their thumbs, and this little plastic car is traveling at like 20 or 30 miles per hour up and over these jumps. It's crazy to see. I love that part of it, and that's something that you would never find at, for instance, the skate park at Northside Park in Norfolk, where it's just so tame. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah. It's great that they've built this park, but it's, you can tell that like a lawyer and a safety risk analyst were instrumental in deciding how this public skate park is going to be laid out.
Correct.
Yeah, and there's nothing that's too extreme, nothing that's too deep.
These were contractors that built that, not kids.
Not kids, yeah. Exactly. That's the other part. Oh my gosh. It's been an interesting time there. I took Kelvin and Brandon and his friend Justin over there yesterday with their bikes and skateboards to Northside, and so we only had about half an hour, but they got out there for the first time, and I think Justin has been there 2 or 3 times before, but Brandon and Kelvin had never been there before. And it was, to them, I mean, just because they're only 6, 8 years old, and they're watching these older kids doing all this really cool stuff, like, it was so easy.
Right.
And I could just see Kelvin's frustration with, like, I can't even pull a damn wheelie, and here's this kid who's just like, doing all this crazy stuff on his bike in the pool, and I can't do anything. And I was like, okay, I get that feeling. I still get that when I'm 40.
Yeah.
You're still like riding, and you're like, oh, I can't hang with some of those other folks. What do you do in those situations when you feel like you're outclassed with other riders?
Oh, wow. I feel like that every time I'm on a ride. I put myself in that position. I was just on a ride today with Chad Holm and Jen Pope. Uh-huh. Both of them are much stronger than I am. And, I think that's the, maybe other people see it differently, but I want to be with people who are better than me.
Yeah.
And what I always tell anybody who's better than me is, if you don't see me anymore, I know my way back. And I want them to never feel like they're held back. But my big goal is to hang on and see if I can, first of all, hang on, and second, even contribute a little bit. Like in this case, we were on road bikes. And when you're on road bikes, the idea is everybody takes pulls. And I did take my pulls, but, there was this understanding that they're stronger than I am, and I take less pulls than they do.
Right.
And shorter pulls. And I don't know, maybe, I don't think I learned that at Kelvin's age, but I certainly have learned that while riding is that it's a joy to be with people that are better because it's a challenge. And as long as I'm not holding them back, and I try to make it clear I never want to hold anyone back.
Yeah.
That keeps me going. I'll never forget Annette Johnson saying once in the Conti's ride, there's such a sense of accomplishment over the smallest things. There's this bridge in Virginia Beach, and there's this ride that's been going on in Virginia Beach for a few decades now. And there's this one bridge, the Great Neck Bridge, and just being able to get over that bridge with the group.
Yes. That's a
you
big
get to the bottom. You get to the bottom of the bridge, and you're regrouping in the Food Line parking lot. And doggone it, if nothing else went right that week, if you were able to get over that bridge with the A group, certainly I can't ever do that anymore. But with the A- group, in my case, if I'm able to do that, then it's a good day.
Yeah, especially you pull into the parking lot there, and you get a 30-second break while the slow group is catching up, and you're just like, you sip a little Gatorade, have a bite of your Cliff Bar, and just be like, and I'm not in the slow group today.
That's right.
That is a good feeling. I love that one.
Getting Old by Paul Furnell. Getting old with the bike means gaining endurance and wisdom. It's having the ability to go further more calmly, to train better, and in general to get more out of it. But aging also means going slower, lunging less quickly, soon not lunging at all, and soon enough not caring that somebody else lunges right in front of you. There's ruin in the cyclist aging as well. I rode the fastest between the ages of 28 and 32. Since then, I've been on the decline, and it's not going to get any better. This decline, which happens in stages, is tolerable. You can manage it in the fatalistic mode. You can manage it in friendship, aging in the peloton. The only indispensable things are a real love of the bike and a reasonable serenity. The big existential advantage of this aging of the thighs is that it always precedes the overall, inevitable aging of the cyclist himself. Therefore, I've entrusted my bike with the mission of notifying me of my aging, and it's doing nicely. In every episode of Tell Me About Your Bike, I want to give a shout out to a podcast that inspired me to start podcasting. And of course, the next one that I need to list is Radiolab. I mean, you can't listen to podcasts and not have heard Radiolab. It changed the way that I listened to music. It changed the way that I listened to podcasts and the radio. It created a need for perfectionism and attention to detail that I would say actually probably hindered my production of this podcast. Because in my mind I was thinking, well, if this isn't as good as Radiolab, it's not worth doing. But you know what? That's not true. You just have to get out there and do it. I'm pretty sure that's what Jada Boomerad would tell me. So if you have not listened to Radiolab, go back and check it out. It is an amazing podcast. And I also need to give a shout out to Zoe Keating, an amazing cellist that has appeared on Radiolab a couple of times, especially on their episode About Time. She does some amazing stuff where she samples and loops her cello and plays along with herself on the cello. It is fantastic. You've probably already heard Zoe Keating if you listen to National Public Radio during the interstitials, the little musical moments between segments of the shows. You probably just didn't know that you were hearing Zoe Keating. So she's fantastic. Go check out Zoe Keating. Go check out Radiotopia. So thanks, y'all, for listening to the latest episode of my podcast, Tell Me About Your Bike. Please rate and review it wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be launching a Patreon page soon. And if you like what you've heard, please pass this podcast on to a friend. If you really like what you heard and you know someone who needs a podcast produced, pass my name on to them. I'm between seasonal bicycle jobs right now, and I'm looking to tell more audio stories. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. If you've got a story to tell about your bicycle, drop me a line. Let's meet up, let's ride together, and let's make some memories. Cheers, y'all.